What we're going to do now is configure some iSCSI LUNs. So the first thing we need to do is some stuff on the iSCSI on the ESX interface. If I go to the server and I go to networking, again, what I want to highlight here is the vSwitch can be configured to either accept or deny promiscuous, promiscuous mode packets and frames. It's not explicitly required that you switch them to accept. The Celerra Sim will work with accept or deny there. Other simulators, however, require that you switch that to accept. So I just wanted to note that change. I generally switch it to promiscuous mode accept, generally because the lab doesn't need to be particularly highly secure. The next thing that you need to do is you need to go into the storage adapters. So I'm going to scroll through the list here, and you can see that I'm using the iSCSI software adapter in this particular case. And it's got an IQN or an iSCSI qualified name that identifies it. You'll also notice that it's got targets listed as 0. So the IQN is what you're going to use to mask or present those iSCSI LUNs. So later on we're going to need to copy and paste the particular IQN in. So here you can see that this is on the screen. If we go configure, first of all, iSCSI needs to be enabled. That check mark needs to be hit. And if it isn't enabled, when you do hit it, it'll generate that IQN, that full name there. That's basically the thing that is the thing that identifies the host. You can hit Control-C to copy it. The next thing you need to do is add that iSCSI target that we created earlier to this Send Targets dynamic discovery pane. Basically what happens is that when you do a rescan HBA, what it does is it goes out to all of the targets that are listed here and say, hey, do you have any iSCSI LUNs to present to me? Now, for reasons I don't know why, this does seem to take a fairly long time on an ESX server, but boom, there you go. And you can see that it's on the standard TCP port for iSCSI. Let's do the same thing on the other. So I go to the other node in the cluster, go to the iSCSI HBA, it's enabled, and then I would copy and paste that in. We'll add in the target, the iSCSI target. You'll notice that, by the way, you can have many iSCSI targets listed here. The choices of when you have many iSCSI targets versus just one is more complex than we've got time for this quick intro. Some very good technical white papers on it from EMC and from VMware that describe when are the right times to use one or the other. The other thing I wanted to highlight is you need to go into the firewall properties and enable iSCSI. By default, that's not enabled. So once again, just click on Security Profile, and under Ungrouped, right there, Software iSCSI is on there. It's one of the things that often stumps people. It looks all right, and you're wondering, why can't I see this iSCSI LUN? Just make sure that you've got that firewall setting to allow those iSCSI ports to be open. Now let's go back to the Celerra Management GUI, and let's run the simple, easy wizard for creating an iSCSI LUN. Of course, I clicked on the wrong thing here. I clicked on Tools, but that's easily rectified. There's an iSCSI LUN wizard. So you can see right there, boom, let's create a new iSCSI LUN, which will start the whole wizard process. Now let's scroll up. We're going to pick the data mover. In this case, we only have one, which is server 2. By the way, server 1 is the name of the control station, in case you're wondering why data movers always start their numbering at 2. On a really high-end Celerra, you could have, once again, 8 data movers. And of course, you could have many Celerras all managed via one Celerra Manager console. Now we're going to identify the target that we're going to use. We only have one, which is the CS prod target 1 that we identified earlier. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a file system to host this particular VM. Now the reason that this is just important to understand is that it's a little counterintuitive for people who are used to pure block platforms to say, I'm going to create a file system in which I create an iSCSI, which is a block device living inside a file system. That seems backwards. Like all filer-based platforms, the Celerra, NetApp FAS platforms, OpenFiler, they all fit into this kind of category. iSCSI LUNs are really files within file systems. By the way, this is why EMC has both the Celerra as an iSCSI target, which is the right iSCSI target for customers who need NAS and iSCSI, and also the Clarion. The Clarion is a pure block device, so it doesn't have this extra layer of a file system in the middle. In some cases, one way is better than the other. EMC's philosophy is choice. Some customers prefer one way versus the other. And there's certainly strengths of doing it the other way as well. There's certain things that you gain by having a file system present block devices that are very, very difficult to do in a pure block device. So let's start the process. We're going to create a file system. Now you can see here that you've got the choice of either specifying where it goes or a pool. So let's pick a pool. Pools are simple and easy, but you can also specify. Here you can see there are two different pools with different RAID configs, different drive types. So you can basically tier your storage. Now I'm going to give the file system a name and a size. So you can see what percentage of the pool it's going to use. There's some neat advanced features like file level retention for policy-based worm type functions and retention and movement of files. And again, the wizard kind of gives you a summary. Okay, great. The file system that we need to host our iSCSI LUN is now complete. Okay, great. So now we've got it from the pick list. We'll pick that one that we just created. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create the LUN. Now you'll notice that you could create multiple LUNs. You could create read-only LUNs. Read-only LUNs you'll eventually use for replication targets. Here we're going to put in 5,000, and you'll notice that the percentage of the file system is also shown in real time. You can also thinly provision these LUNs, again, which is beyond the scope of this kind of quick tutorial, but you can thinly provision the file system, you can thinly provision LUNs, lots of cool advanced capabilities. Now what you need to do is mask the LUN. So we want to say enable multiple access, which means I'm going to present this single LUN to multiple nodes, in this case all of the nodes of my ESX cluster. So it says, hey, what's the IQN of that host that you want to add? So we'll go back to storage adapters. We're going to scroll down to the iSCSI initiator, go to properties, configure, and we're going to grab that IQN, hit Control C, and paste it in there. Weird thing, by the way, that I've noticed, and I don't understand why, is that if you have the virtual center dialog box for the IQN open, you won't be able to use anything via any console screen. So just as a weird note here is when you hit copy, make sure you just close that screen. Otherwise, when you go back here, you're not going to be able to paste anything. And that's true of any console screen. It's a VC bug. Okay, you can configure CHAP and reverse CHAP. Most customers with iSCSI frankly don't. My personal opinion is they're more worried than they should be about security on iSCSI. Fiber Channel generally doesn't use any security either. You do need to enable the iSCSI service. It's the same idea as on the ESX server. And then here you can see that the wizard says, here are all the steps that we're going to need to do to complete the task that you've asked me to do. So boom, you can see it's giving you step-by-step feedback. Yep, I managed to complete that step. Everything's good, 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 good. And eventually the wizard is complete. So let's close this. I'll minimize that screen. Go back to Virtual Center. By the way, that one host that's read it out, I just turned it off to save power. It's not damaged. So now what we're going to do is hit rescan. When you hit rescan, you can scan for new storage devices and new VMFS volumes. Rescans can take a bit. There's some very good remote CLI and service console commands where you can rescan all of the nodes in the cluster, but you'll notice that the target count just increased from 2 to 3, meaning that this iSCSI initiator now has 3 LUNs that it's currently logged into. Likewise, if we go and we repeat the step on the other host, you'll see the similar kind of process. You need to do this for every host that's in the cluster. Again, there's some great tools and scripts that basically do this for your entire cluster in one step. Now, the last step that you need to do once the LUN is visible to all the hosts is configure a VMFS volume on top of it. So here you identify disk or LUN. Here's the LUN that we just created. Hard disk has nothing on it, so let's give it a name. Something obvious like Celerra iSCSI LUN 10, the LUN number. And then you can specify the VMFS parameters. And then boom, you now have got a new VMFS volume to create VMs in, to be able to expand, and later on to configure using Site Recovery Manager. All done.